Happy Sunday, my dear fellow YouTubers, YouTube audience, YouTube people, book club followers. Welcome to another version of the Breaking Chains Book Club, where we are about to dive into reading a new book. Hello, people coming in. This book is called Shame Has to Change Sides by Gisele Pelicot. It has another title too, but it's not as relevant. But basically, in case you have not heard of this incredible story, I am going to show you a video of her being interviewed about the release of her book. Gisele Pelicot was a woman in France who last year went through a mass grape trial because her husband of 50 years or something like that was drugging her and selling her to men while she was unconscious for years and years and years in their small community in France. And I cannot imagine, first of all, just the absolute living horror of being called into the police station and finding out that your husband has been recording grapes of you unconscious for many, many years. There's that whole level of insanity. But then there's the trial where she makes the incredibly brave and courageous choice to de-anonymize herself. She had the choice to be anonymous and not show her face at the trial. She chose to name herself, which was insanely brave of her because she's an elderly woman. She's never been public. She's always been a very private person, and she went public with her name and showed up every single day to that trial. And something like 20 men were essentially sentenced to varying degrees of prison. But I find this story to be similar, in kind to what's going on with the Poopy Head Files. I don't say his name on my channel, but the Poopy Head Files, this is the same type of idea that women are just there to be used as sex toys, whether they want it or not. And it's a prevalent view that I see very, very it's one of those massive chains around the brain of our collective world that we have to break. And I see Gisele Pelicot as one of an incredibly powerful brain shaker. Chain breaker. So let me show you this report on her so you can get a background on Gisele and her story. It's incredible.
We begin this morning with Seth Doan and an unimaginable crime that made headlines around the world. Warning, this is not a story for younger viewers.
I lived for 50 years with Mr. Pelicot, who was a kind man, a devoted family man. It was a beautiful love story, until the day I found myself facing the horror of the facts.
Those facts shattered Gisele Pelicot's seemingly normal life.
The trial shaking much of Europe.
A trial that's gotten worldwide attention.
A horrifying story of French survivor Gisele Pelicot.
And it put her at the center of a mass rape trial, an unthinkable crime. It gripped France. But it was her response that would be defining.
I understand this is your first ever interview.
Yes, it's a first. I'm not used to speaking in front of cameras. I used to be a very discreet woman.
It all unraveled in 2020 inside this supermarket, when what seemed like a small crime uncovered a far greater one. Her husband, Dominique Pelicot, was caught taking video up women's skirts.
That's a whole other level to this insanity. So not only was he doing this to his wife, but he was also frequently going around to shops and stores and filming up women's dresses. And that was how he got caught. So initially, when he was caught, all they thought was, oh, he's a peeping Tom who films up women's dresses. But then they went and looked at all his other devices and found, after they caught him doing this, they, did more of an investigation into him and found that he had been drugging and raping the same woman for many years. And it turned out to be his wife, who didn't know. So let's keep watching this.
His arrest led to the discovery of disturbing footage taken inside their home of Gisele Pelicot unconscious. At a local police station, an investigator told her what they'd found.
He said, Mrs. Pelicot, do you recognize yourself in these photos? And I said, no, it's not me. Then he said, this is your bedroom. And I see a woman I don't recognize at all, completely asleep, with a man beside her. I don't know this man. And then he says, I'm going to tell you something shocking. You were raped by 53 individuals.
Whoa. I mean, whoa. If you're married, have a long-term spouse or partner, and you find this out by the police, it must have been absolutely earth-shattering.
My world collapsed.
You described the woman as looking like a rag doll. That woman was you.
Yes, it was me, but this woman was lifeless. She looked dead.
Do you remember crying, screaming, blocking everything out?
I could not speak. I was in such a state of shock. All I wanted was to go home to get my life back as it was before.
But that life was gone. The man she knew was a loving father to their 3 children and a doting grandfather had been drugging her with sleeping pills and muscle relaxants, then inviting men he met online to abuse her.
We talk about hundreds of rapes over a period of time of at least 10 years.
Wow.
She and her lawyer, Stéphane Bobineau, started to grasp the scale of the crimes as they prepared for trial.
How many videos? How many photos?
Photos, we are in the range of hundreds, if not thousands. And for videos, definitely hundreds.
Among the evidence, messages Dominique Pelicot posted online. I'm looking for a pervert accomplice to abuse my sleeping wife. And text messages. I'm about to dose her. We have to wait at least 1 hour to abuse.
This is what would happen to your body if you...
Yeah, Autumn. Actually, someone, I think I would end up charged too if I were her. That interviewer asked her, I don't know if we just heard it, but I missed it because I was looking at something else, but she said that she's always had a detachment. She's always been able to be detached, but I think just automatically this is going to cause intense dissociation. She may not even know she's dissociating and still is. I mean, it hasn't really even been that long. The trial was just last year, like middle of last year. So, and the charges were, I think, a couple years before that while they got the trial ready. So I think she's probably still to some degree in a state of shock. And, dissociation is something that our brains do for us when we are, when we're facing something so traumatic that our brain knows we can't deal with it in that moment. So then you're left to deal with it for the rest of your life and processing it. Yep. coping. That's what coping is. So I did text my lovely co-reader, but I haven't heard back from her. She must be out enjoying. It's a beautiful day in California. I'm not sure if it's beautiful where she is, but it's beautiful where I am anyway. So at any rate, I'm glad she's out enjoying if she is. But so I'm going to go ahead and start reading this for you, and I'm going to get as far as I can, without getting fatigued. But I just want to get this book on the record because I think it's incredibly important, and she is an example of what it means to break chains that she never even realized she had to break, So with that, let's go ahead and get started, and I'll start reading. Chapter 1. I always set the table for breakfast the night before. I put out coffee cups, plates, cutlery, napkins, pots of honey, and jam, almost as a way of reaching across the hours of darkness that I fear, of proclaiming the harmony of the day to come. When all there is to do in the morning is to get out the butter, put on the kettle, and wait for the smell of coffee and toast to fill the air, all will be well. Oh, I'm sorry, Solo. I didn't mean to rub it in. I hope you're okay. Okay. That evening, as usual, I got everything ready, even Dominique's clothes. That's her husband. Let's call him Dominique. I never used to call him that. I preferred affectionate nicknames. Jouomie. Okay, by the way, this book has been translated from the French, and I'm terrible at French. I'm much better at Spanish. Please forgive my terrible French pronunciations. Dume, But afterwards, I didn't know what to call him anymore. I called him Monsieur Pelicot. Monsieur Pelicot. Now that it is time to tell our story, I've decided to use his first name. I put out a pair of bottle green corduroy trousers and a pink Lacoste polo shirt the children had given him. We had to be at the police station the following morning. The appointment was at 9:30. After we woke up, we drank our coffee and listened to the news on RTL. The global COVID pandemic had picked up with a vengeance, and another lockdown was in force. I looked up at the sky through the kitchen window facing me. It was going to be a lovely day, so I suggested a long walk after lunch as a way of defying the government's restrictions and as an antidote to the morning summons. Dominique sat opposite me and said nothing. I remember it was November 2nd. Reminded him it was November 2nd. My brother, Michel, would have been 69 today. He sighed and said he didn't like November. It was never a good month. No doubt an allusion to all the bills and notices of unpaid invoices that were about to come in. My ghosts and our money problems hung there between us in the kitchen for a moment. But we had always lived with them, and in a way, they had brought us closer. Dominique went to take a shower while I cleared the table. As we were about to leave, he pulled on a jacket that did not go at all with the outfit I had put together for him. I told him so, and he shrugged. We took my car. He drove us to the Carpentras police station. 2 months earlier, I had been staying with our daughter, Caroline, and her husband, Pierre, outside Paris, looking after my grandson until school started, and we had gone to spend the weekend at their holiday home in the Ile-de-Ré, the Atlantic coast of France. That's where I was when Dominique called me, sounding unusually agitated. He stammered something about having lost his mobile. He needed a code to activate the new one he had just bought to replace it. He'd had it sent to my number. I gave him the code, but everything about this usually methodical and organized man seemed suddenly in disarray. When he came to pick me up at the station a few days later, he looked gaunt. We got home and he burst into tears. He said he couldn't bear to lose me. I thought immediately of my father's grief when my mother died. Dominique sat beside me, shaking with sobs, and I was unable to console him. I feared he might be ill, that his cancer might have returned to take him away for good. When Dominique finally confessed to me that the previous week he had done something foolish at the Carpentras branch of the Leclerc supermarket, he'd been caught by a security guard filming up 3 women's skirts, ended up at the police station, and had his phone and computer seized. I was upset, but I was also, in a way, almost relieved. It was terrible to think of my husband stalking these women, unbearable to imagine him as an offender, but it could have been so much worse. This was not irreversible. My fears were measured on a different scale. Only death really frightened me. I'm going to look at chat for a moment. Yeah, you could probably say murder mister too if it says a lot. So I told him that we would keep the incident between us. I wouldn't tell the children so as not to hurt them, and I wasn't about to give up on him, but he absolutely had to apologize to the women he had filmed and see a therapist. There wouldn't be a next time, because if there was, I would leave. I promise you, he said, it won't happen again. I would never be able to forget what he had done. It was a warning sign, but a warning of what? I had no idea. I just wanted our life to go back to normal. Life resumed in our little yellow house with blue shutters, the backdrop to our life in retirement in the south of France. The pool cover was on. The oleanders had finished blooming. Autumn was drawing near. In mid-October, I had gone up to Paris, this time to look after the children of my son, David, who was due to undergo minor surgery. I was always going back and forth whenever I was needed to look after one or another set of grandchildren. The school holiday schedule became my own. I rushed up to Paris anytime there was a problem, too. I was mommy now, the traveling grandma. I wasn't afraid of getting old. I knew it was a privilege. Obviously, when I was at David's, I spent most of the time with my granddaughters. Every morning, Charlize stubbornly refused to wear anything but a tracksuit. Clemence, her twin sister, was always changing outfits and had a penchant for princess dresses. They were 9 years old, the age I was when I lost my mother. Yeah, dissociation can be a lifesaver, actually. But also, if you stay in dissociation, then you don't really totally heal. So you really do have to see a therapist while you're doing that. But I get it. I didn't hear the phone ring that morning. I was sitting at the tennis courts. Clemence and I were watching Charlize as she ran after the ball. Her forehand had improved. I saw I had missed a call, unknown number. I called back a little later. Bonjour. Were you trying to reach me? The man introduced himself. This is Deputy Sergeant Perret from the Carpentras Police. Are you aware that we interviewed your husband a few weeks ago? Do you have any idea what this is about? Yes, I said. My husband had told me everything. My answer resounded inside me like a quiet victory. Transparency and trust were at the heart of our long marriage. Right. And I added, I had lived with this man for 50 years and he had never yet let me down. When will you be back? On October 21st. I can come see you straight away. No, we have too much work to do. Come with your husband on November 2nd. And so November 2nd arrived. Dominique had no reason to sob like Papa had when Maman died. No worry. It's only a formality, I said to Dominique as we arrived at the police station, a low, unassuming modern building, yellow like our house, the color of Providence. We walked in, each masked up with one of those pale blue rectangles that now covered every mouth on the planet. We had just reported to the reception desk when a man with a crew cut leaned over the balustrade on the first floor of the police station. It was Deputy Sergeant Perret. I'll see Monsieur Pelicot first, then Madame afterwards, he called down. Dominique walked up the staircase in his ill-matching jacket without looking back. A short while later, the police officer reappeared and motioned for me to follow him. I went briskly up the stairs, assuming that I would find Dominique in Perret's office. He wasn't there. The police officer indicated the chair opposite him, far enough away from his desk that I could take off my mask. I immediately apologized profusely for what my husband had done. The man across from me was tall and solidly built, with a strong face above his wide shoulders. He seemed to embody authority, and yet there was something gentle and cautious in the way he talked to me. He asked me to confirm my identity and the date and place of my birth, December 7th, 1952, in Villingen, Germany. Maiden name Guillot, Greek Guillot. Parents' names Yves Guillot and Jean Pro. He asked me how Dominique and I first met, and I told him it was at my mother's sister's house in July 1971. I added, a genuine case of love at first sight. He wanted to know how I would describe my husband's character. He's kind, attentive, he's a lovely guy. That's why we're still together. He asked if we like to entertain. I replied that we often had friends over. He asked me to describe a typical evening. I said that we didn't really have a routine. We weren't that old yet. He asked me what time I went to bed, whether it was at the same time as my husband, whether I took a nap in the afternoon. I was a little taken aback by his questions. Are you into swinging? I didn't understand anymore. I heard myself replying no. Never. How ghastly. Now she's in the dissociation mode right here. She's leaving her body, basically. I heard myself sputtering that swinging was not something I would ever consider. That I couldn't imagine anyone else touching me. That for me, there needs to be love with sex. He asked if I thought I knew my husband well and whether I trusted that he would never hide anything from me. I said yes. I am going to show you some photographs and videos that you're not going to like. I sensed something rising in his voice, not only embarrassment, but a curious mix of danger and protectiveness. He told me that Dominique had been taken into custody for aggravated rape and for administering toxic substances. I think I burst into tears. I moved towards his desk and put my hand back and put my mask back on. He picked up a photograph and held it out to me, a woman in a suspender belt lying on her side. A suspender belt. A black man behind her penetrating her. That's you in the photograph. No, that's not me. I got out my glasses. He got out another photograph. This same woman on her back, a tattooed man alongside her. That's you. No. I did not recognize those men, nor that woman. Her cheek was so floppy, her mouth so limp. She looked like a rag doll. A third paragraph. The man had kept his firefighters. A third photograph. The man had kept his firefighter's sweater on. I couldn't hear what the police officer was saying. She's completely out of her body at this point. Or rather, I could hear him, but it had nothing to do with me. It was like the echo of a faraway voice. Her brain is taking over and protecting her. This is your bedroom. Aren't those your bedside lamps? So that is not me lying lifeless on the bed. It's a Photoshop picture made by someone trying to hurt Dominique. Just last night, while we were watching the news on television, there was a woman who had been intubated because of COVID, and he'd said how he would hate to see me like that. The officer says a number. He tells me 53 men had come to my house to arm me. I ask for water. My mouth is paralyzed. A psychologist comes into the office. A young woman. I don't need her. I am far away, even though we are in the same room. I am secure in my happiness, our happiness. Our 50th wedding anniversary is coming up, and the memory of how we met is still clear in my mind. His smile, his shy expression, his long curly hair falling to his shoulders, his Breton sweater. He was going to love me. My brain shut down in Deputy Sergeant Perret's office. Oh my God, I want to weep. Hi, Adrian. Good to see you. Yep, 20 years on and off therapy, and the connecting the past with my feelings sucks so much. I preferred saying it was like a book, someone else's story. Our minds are funny. Absolutely, Solo. Odd Renee says, one of my friends had herself checked in because she was aware she was dissociated and couldn't phase back in, so to speak. She said it felt like watching from above. Something triggered it. How discombobulating. insanely discombobulating. I can't fucking imagine. And I would venture to say she's probably not completely returned or, phased back in. And I actually saw an interview with a singer. I forget who the singer was. He was a singer of a band. I think it was actually the singer. I know I wouldn't be able to walk either, Autumn Renee. I would have to, I would be wheeled out on a wheelchair or a gurney or something like that. Maybe have a heart attack or a stroke, I saw an interview with the guy who sang Mr. Jones. I forget his name right now. Forgive me if you're like, what the fuck? You don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Jones, that song, Mr. Jones, that singer literally was born with dissociation. Like his brain completely kept him constantly in a different place than he was. Like, can you imagine being born that way? You wouldn't even know. You wouldn't even know what's going on because you've never known anything different. Yeah, I don't think it's Smashbox 20. It's that guy that sang Mr. Jones, and I'm so sorry I'm forgetting it right now, but let me keep going. Chapter 2. I'm going to take a little drink quickly. It was July 1971. I had come to stay with my Aunt Andrée for a few days after she'd lost her husband. I wanted to be there for her as she had always been there for me. Almost as soon as I arrived, she started telling me about a young man called Dominique she had recently employed. Now that my uncle had passed away, she and her son needed help keeping their small electrical business afloat. It was right next to their house, a company called Gano, a wooden-fronted workshop covered with billboards advertising all kinds of new electrical technology. Modernization was moving full steam ahead in the French countryside. There's so much work to do, my aunt often said. I recognized in her the mute suffering of the local people, the obligation to keep pace with the changing times, but I also saw my mother's milky skin. My mother had died 9 years earlier in our house, which was almost right next door. In my aunt's gestures and voice, I spied similarities and echoes of her sister, her favorite sister. They'd been like twins, so close, thick as thieves. I had come back to the countryside of my childhood, to the turbid source of my melancholy and my joy. I listened to my aunt talking about this new employee who was currently helping my cousin put in electrical installations in neighboring farms. I would get to meet him, she promised. He tended to stick around after work. He sometimes even stayed for dinner. His red Citroën 2CV was parked in front of the house on the road between Châtillon-sur-Indre and Aizé-les-Ferrons. Nothing bad was ever going to happen to me here. To get a sense of this place, you have to imagine the chateau dotted around the landscape, the sometimes sumptuous, sometimes crumbling old buildings that were visible from the road or the train and seemed to open doors onto other centuries, other worlds. When we were little, our mother brought my brother and me to stay every summer. I spent my childhood running around the grounds of empty castles. I don't think I ever dreamed of being a princess or made up stories about Prince Charming, even though the round towers and pointed roofs of the Chateau d'Aizé-les-Ferrons might have come straight out of a fairy tale. I knew where I came from. My brother and I were the grandchildren of Marie and Roger Pro, peasants from the hamlet of Les Châteliers. I walked with my, I'm so sorry about my horrible French accent, you guys, and pronunciation. I walked with my grandmother behind the goats and the dog. I watched her making cheese in the cellar, pulling the scalding laundry from the tub, piling it into the wheelbarrow to go and rinse it with a paddle in the public washing place in the village. And I drink miel, a mixture of water, sugar, and wine. Interesting. In which we dunked pieces of bread when we helped at the grape harvest with our house. She is just thoroughly French. Water, sugar, and wine. That is thoroughly French. Lying in my little bed in the morning, I heard the voice of my grandfather, a carpenter, offering coffee to the workers. I listened to the reassuring ballet of the adults around me, felt their presence, their roles, their love. On the long kitchen table, there was always a big 4-pound loaf of bread cut into thick slices, a steaming pot of coffee, a bowl of fromage blanc, freshly picked peaches, fresh fruit. I think it is the memory of that table that I am holding on to as I set the breakfast table every morning. The breakfast table every evening. Interesting. Is nestled inside me like those extensions tucked underneath old wooden tables, ready to be pulled out to their full length for family celebrations. I would like to extend its promises into infinity. In my memory, the cockerel still crows, the sun creeps through the slats in the shutters. Hi, Sharon. Nice to see you. Yeah. Okay. This setting would have grown hazy and picturesque. Should have grown hazy and picturesque, a distant memory of holidays. But the 20th century was seeing dramatic changes. World War II was slowly receding into a profound silence. Young people were leaving the countryside for their city and the suburbs. Just as Maman had, and some of her brothers and sisters already had, land consolidation in the countryside would soon expand estates and wipe out smallholders with their little fields full of hedge groves, thickets, and rocky slopes where snakes hid. Soon, the bakers' and butchers' vans would no longer come to the village honking their horns before cutting the motor and opening up their back doors. All those rough linen sheets, washed with methylene blue and hung out to dry in the sun, would end up in flea markets. But in 1957, in a move that ran counter to the rest of the world, our family relocated back there. The course of life was reversed. I was 5 years old, my brother 6, around the age when memories become fixed. Our parents rented an unheated house, originally an outbuilding of the chateau. We lived on the second floor of the suite of large rooms with high ceilings and huge chimneys. There was a kitchen at the back, no bathroom, just a jug and a basin filled with water that we heated in the winter and drew from the big tub left outside in the summer to warm up in the sun. We only had to cross the meadow to go to find Aunt Jean. Our grandparents were a few minutes away by foot. The house was at the end of the main road that led to the chateau. I'll just say. The groundskeeper knew us well. Michel, me, and our cousins. He would see us walking down the street, a few centimes tinkling in our pockets, stopping at Mother Tancho's little grocery shop, and then emerging mouths filled with toffees or fingers sticky from packets of sherbet powder before heading back to the estate. We were as happy playing among alleys of trees clipped into straight lines in the French style as we were running nearby past and along fields. We crossed borders and centuries without noticing, understood nothing about the divisions between men or their wars, for which Papa, a professional soldier who was only ever briefly home on leave, was constantly setting off. But we were able to distinguish between the 2CVs and the 4CVs that belonged to the locals and the Citroën DSs that belonged to the rich people who parked in front of the patisserie in blah, blah, blah. Azé de la Ferrand, famous for its millefeuille, well, that's a word, and a cake shaped like a melon, from which it got its name, melon with almonds, that was served with creme anglaise. And we knew why our grandmother always wore mourning dresses, even though our grandfather was still alive. I was with her and Maman the day one of my uncles came to tell us that Micheline had died. His eyes were red, and his 2 little boys stood next to him clutching their pillows. Their sister had got burnt when their mother was heating up the alcohol she used to pluck chickens. The liquid had spilled on her, and she didn't survive the journey to the hospital. Oh my God. My cousin Micheline was dead. She was one of us, a little girl with cropped brown hair, not the cousin I played with the most. She was older, 12, but she was family. The next day, my grandmother put on the black dress that she would wear for the rest of her life. And all around us, the trees, fields, and chateau would bear witness to how we knew to hold our tears in. Oh my God, that is fucking tragic. Jesus. Most of all, we knew that Mammon was very ill. Sometimes she went to hospital and was brought back, pale and thin, on a trolley pushed by the ambulance drivers. I was always afraid that she would fall off, that she would roll onto the ground and never make it back inside the house. One day, as we were walking to school, one of my cousins let slip the word cancer. She was talking about someone else, but the word stuck. It sounded like a possible explanation and also like a death sentence. Soon after, Grandmere began cycling over to our house to take care of everything, to look after us all, especially Mammon. I watched her arrive in her black dress every morning and leave every evening. Mammon never cried, or at least never in front of us, so I never did either. I once heard her scream. The slightest pressure caused her pain. The cancer had reached her bones. No one could touch her anymore. I watched my grandmother unroll long bands of white cotton that she had padded behind Mammon's shoulders. Her pelvis was in a plaster cast. Her bed had been moved to the kitchen near the window so that she was never alone. There was the red formica table next to it with the Telefunken radio sitting on top and the smell of polish with which Helene, the cleaner, gave a high shine to the copper pieces Papa brought back from Algeria, where he had been deployed. These memories were still vivid when I returned to my aunt's house in the summer of 1971. Everything in me was trembling. I was unsteady on my feet. The past was pulling me in with all its happiness and tragedy, as if my life had already been mapped out. And then Dominique walked into the kitchen. I'd been stung between the eyes by a wasp. I'd been stung between the eyes by a wasp that day. Oh my gosh. The venom was circulating. My eyelids were so swollen I could barely see. Oh my gosh. I must have looked unrecognizable. He reminded me of the pop star Julian Clerc with his shoulder-length curls and his striped sweater. He stayed late at my aunt's house that evening, obviously putting off the moment he would have to go home to his parents at Châtillon-sur-Indre. He appeared very fond of my family, who offered him a warmth he seemed never to have encountered before. As if he were seeking some kind of reparation or affection, I was too. I was 19 that summer and living in Paris with my father, brother, and stepmother, working as a secretary at a printing press that produced bank checks. To Dominique, I was a Parisienne with everything that the countryside can project onto that word. In fact, we were just two kids who had been pushed into working at a very young age, and we had both spent our childhood scraping our knees in this corner of the Indre. His shyness reassured me. He blushed a lot. He was not one of those self-assured young men. I knew nothing of love. I had never even had a flirtation, but I just knew that he was going to love me. The fact that I met him at Andre's house was a sign from Maman that she was watching over me. This man was going to fall in love with me, and my life, which had lost its meaning, was about to take on a new purpose. As soon as I got back to Paris, I told my father about him. He poured cold water on my enthusiasm. He said that I was too young, that we had no life experience as a career soldier. He disapproved of the fact that Dominique had avoided military service. I think he didn't want to let me go. I was not yet legally an adult, but I was earning my living, and every weekend I would take the train to the Indre to be with Dominique, bringing him gifts of sweaters and cologne I had bought in Paris. I was drawing him towards me, towards the city and away from his family, whom I was only beginning to get to know. I'm going to look at chat real quickly. Oh, ouch. Ouch, Autumn. His mother, Juliette, said that he would be unhappy in Paris. She was 50 and already looked worn out by life. His father, Dennis Pelicot, seemed to be constantly shouting. They often spoke admiringly of his brother, Joel, who was studying medicine in Tours, whereas Dominique had left school early and still handed over his electrician's salary to his parents each month. He shared a bedroom with Nicole, a little girl with a learning disability who was a ward to the state, being fostered by the family. The other bedroom was where his paternal grandfather slept. For many years, he had been a porter at a grand hotel in Trouville, and from the way he said it, it was as if he had returned from a distant continent. He suffered from Parkinson's now. Dominique's parents slept in the living room. I sensed how bleak their world was, their sad lives behind all these closed doors. And yet it was under that very roof that we made love for the first time. I kept putting the moment off. I wanted to be sure. I needed to know he was the one. He was in more of a hurry, but I was prepared to wait until I was ready. It happened one night in May 1972. I was visiting for the weekend, staying at his parents' house, and since we weren't married, I had been given his grandfather's room. In the middle of the night, Dominique sneaked in. It was my first time in his too. So he said. I remember the softness of the skin on skin, how shy we were, and obviously a little awkward. Afterwards, he slipped back into his own room, leaving me with the impression that we had made a pact. We were lovers and we were twins. We would always be together, our suffering behind us. We would escape from our damaged families. I would be his cure and he would be mine. A few months later, he came up to Paris to ask my father for my hand in marriage. My father didn't dare say no. For better or for worse, declared the man who married us on April 14th, 1973, I became Gisele Pelicot. The celebration was a simple one. We had no money. Dominique wore a carnation in his buttonhole. There's a beautiful wedding photograph of the two of us taken in the castle grounds in the shadow of the chateau. I was starting a new life. I was in love. Wow. Wow. All right. I'm going to dive into chapter 3. I'm going to keep going. But actually, but did you notice that he slipped into her room? I'm sort of, snuck into her bedroom. That would portend terrible things, a prognostication. Yikes. I'm wondering if she says that it was his first time too. I wonder if that's really true. That's obviously what he told her. All right, chapter 3. I wanted to go home. Will you be pressing charges? Deputy Sergeant Perret asked. Yes, the word came out of my mouth sounding so meek. If he hadn't asked the question, it never would have occurred to me. I just wanted this to stop, to go home, to get back to my normal life. I signed the crime report form he held out to me, as if signing a disclaimer. Then my statement. I scribbled PCT, the abbreviation of Pelicot, at the bottom of each page without reading any of it, without seeing that I had also said yes. Yes, that is me. That is my room. Those are the words that are written on the document. Those are the words the police heard me say. It's all so different from what I remember. My head was screaming, no, it's not me. It's not him. I don't know where I am anymore. Those words are written too. That's what I said. Laurent Perret suggested a colleague take me home. You should call someone. You mustn't be alone, he said. When I finally left the police station, Dominique must have still been there. A police officer drove my car and parked in the gravel driveway in front of the garage. He did not come inside. He left immediately in the police vehicle that had followed us to the house. I opened the front door with relief, as if coming home might erase the hours that had just passed, as if I could forget them, as I had forgotten so many other things over the last few years. I'd forgotten what we'd done for my birthday only a day before. I'd forgotten saying goodbye to the children when they left. I'd forgotten I'd been to the hairdresser, even though I could see in the mirror that my hair had just been cut and colored. I had been having more and more of these memory lapses. I dreaded them. I was afraid to drive. I was afraid to take the train. I was afraid to miss my station. I was afraid I was dying. But that day, I deliberately wanted to summon that emptiness into my head. I wanted to forget that I had just come home from the police station alone. Impossible. While we were at the station, investigators had been to the house to carry out a search. They'd turned the whole place upside down. I started tidying up. Everything had to be back in its place. I put a load of laundry in the washing machine. Then I rang Pierre, my son-in-law, and left a message. Pierre, can you call me back? It's about Dominique. That was it. No details. Telling and not telling. I had no idea what I was going to say to the children. I vacuumed the living room. I called my friend Sylvie. Can you come over? I have to talk to you. No explanation, like my message to Pierre. She said she would come right away. I was still reeling. I hung Dominique's boxer shorts, pajamas, and trousers on the washing line in the garden. It was a sunny day. The clothes would dry in no time. Everything was nice and clean. I was like a dog waiting by the garden gate for its master. He'd be back soon. His car was in the garage. I vacuumed the bedrooms and started on the pile of ironing. Sylvie arrived. Are you ill? She was afraid I had the C word. We sat down. Dominique's been arrested. He arred me. He brought people to the house to arm me for years. I managed to find a way to say the thing that my whole being refused to hear, the thing that all the obsessive cleaning and tidying I had been doing for the last 2 hours had been an attempt to block out, as I begged the washing machine, the vacuum cleaner, the iron to give me back my life. A wave of shame swelled up inside me as I read the incredulity on Sylvie's face. She knew Dominic well. She knew him for years. We had met at work originally. She was a reserved young woman in the resource management department at EDF, the French national electricity supplier. We'd struck up a friendship and began socializing as couples outside the office. She and her husband used to so enjoy staying with us during the summer that they decided to retire to Mazan too. She didn't understand. Her state of shock confirmed mine. It wasn't possible. But when the police officer called to check that someone was with me, that I wasn't alone, there was so much concern for me in his voice that it made me realize the weight and significance of the case file he was putting together. Can you look to see if you can find any medication in the house? We couldn't find any, he said. So that was what they had been looking for while we were at the police station. What it takes to change a woman into a dead weight. Her features melted onto the pillow so that she doesn't even have a face anymore. Pierre finally called early in the afternoon. He was also worried I might have the C word. That morning, he had left a cheerful message for his father-in-law. The itinerary of the Tour de France had just been announced, and the ascent of Mont Ventoux would take place when they were staying with us in Mazan. What great news! And here I was, once again, forced to say what I didn't want to hear. Your father-in-law has been arrested. He arred me, and he had me raped by, there I go, arred by others. Sometimes I stress clean solo, but I feel ya. I feel ya. Pierre didn't say anything. I went on. I needed his help. I didn't know how to tell Caroline about what was happening. Of all my children, my daughter is the least predictable. She's one of those highly strung people who love and lose their temper in the same breath. She seems to have been filled since childhood with a feeling of insecurity that I have never really understood or been able to soothe. She was 41. I was afraid of telling her, afraid of how she would react. She was about to go through hell and back, that much I knew. I was worried about her. Pierre, who lived with her, understood. He said he'd let me know the minute she got home. Deputy Sergeant Perret came to the house. He was relieved to see Sylvie. He wanted another strand of my hair. The sample taken that morning was insufficient. I let him take some of the fine hairs from the back of my neck. Later, I learned they are traps for chemical substances and can reveal poisoning. The laundry hanging in the garden was already dry. Dominique's boxer shorts and trousers dangling over a void. How I loved our garden and the single-story house we had chosen for our old age. I pictured him a few weeks earlier sitting on our leather sofa and weeping, saying he couldn't bear to lose me. Suddenly I realized he must have already known what was awaiting him. He knew what he was dragging us into, because his computer and his phone had already been seized by the police. And there I was imagining I was seeing the mirror image of my father's grief. It gets dark and early in November. I locked up and then drove behind Sylvie to her house. Her husband, Michel, had got out a bottle of champagne. Sylvie must have warned him before our arrival, and I imagined him trying to figure out what he could do or say, then putting the champagne in the fridge to blur the line between good times and bad. I drained my glass, grateful for the small gesture of positivity. Caroline called around 7 o'clock. I didn't answer. I didn't want her to be alone when I told her. I sent another message to Pierre. He texted back that he would let me know as soon as she got home. You have to stay right by her side, I insisted. A short while later, he messaged to say that he was outside parking the car. I waited 5 minutes before I called. Is Pierre with you? I think you should sit down. I told her that her father was in custody, that he had drugged me and armed me, brought the other men into the house to arm me. She began to scream. A shriek of anguish, the howl of a wounded animal. My daughter was breaking down. The words I was saying to try and calm her were not getting through. Pierre took the phone from her, said a couple words to me, and hung up. As a side note, hello, people coming in. As a side note, I'm pretty sure, I'll have to check into this to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that her daughter then also made claims about her father. Then I called David, my elder son. Sit down. I have bad news, I said softly. I could hear my voice. I was talking like a robot. He listened without reacting. Everyone knows there will be difficult days. We have to tell our children, but not this. Nothing like this. This is beyond the boundaries of what can be imagined. Sure, things can fall apart, but not like this. David didn't respond. Eventually, he said, I have to go to Maman. Later, I found out he had run to the toilet to vomit. Florian, our youngest, was calm and composed when we spoke. He asked how I was and where I was. I told him I was spending the night at Sylvie's. I wasn't alone. I was going to sleep in the guest room upstairs. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Almost every 15 minutes, one or another of the children rang, terrified I was falling apart, just as their own childhoods were collapsing. They kept calling me and then each other to discuss and pick apart the last few years. It was Caroline who said in the middle of the night, but Mama, all those memory lapses, it has to be that. I hadn't made the connection, despite what the police officer had told me, the house search and the 2 samples of hair. Dominique had always been there to witness my memory losses. He was the one who reassured me and took me to the doctor. He was the one to whom my hairdresser had confided her concerns. That time I'd completely forgotten I'd been in for an appointment. I went back the next day to try to piece together what had happened. She told me how relieved she was when I walked in again and described my blank expression in the mirror the day before, my mechanical responses to her reactions, how she had been afraid that I might be having a stroke, how she'd suggested to Dominique I get some tests done as a matter of urgency. He was my ally. I had become convinced I was going to die like my mother. It was my destiny. I had a brain tumor. A brain scan in 2017 proved me wrong, but that wasn't enough to banish the idea from my head. The doctors assured me this is actual physical, literal gaslighting that he did to her. He gaslighted her by chemical. He literally made her think she was going fucking crazy. The doctors assured me it was just anxiety, but that didn't make sense to me. One morning, like Mammon, I was not going to give up, going to wake up. My whole existence revolved around this tragedy. I had wanted my life to be a redemption, but it turned out it was simply a continuation. It was genetic. I felt it. I let myself be taken in by this scenario as the memory lapses became more and more frequent. One moment, please. Sorry, I had to grab a drink. My whole blah, 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 sorry. There was one occasion they told me about later when I was on the phone to my grandson Maxime, Caroline and Pierre's son, and I kept repeating the same thing over and over like a broken record. The little boy was so embarrassed that his parents motioned him to hang up. A neurologist friend of Pierre's said that she thought it might be Alzheimer's. David's wife, Celine, murmured they ought to think about putting me in a home. The signs were alarming. When the children called, it was not unusual for their father to tell them I was too tired to speak. Whenever they came to visit, though, I was fine. There was never anything wrong, except for one time when everyone was leaving to go back to Paris. I had spent lunch slumped in my chair, my arm falling continually as if I couldn't control it. Florian was clearly upset. He didn't want to leave, but his father frog marched him to the car and said, "Don't worry, she's just tired. I'm going to put her to bed." Holy fucking crap. I'm dying inside for this woman. He was going to put me to bed, yes, to army, and invite other men to army a few hours after my son had left. He knew that the poison in my wine glass or in my plate was taking effect. But that first night, I didn't try to piece together all the various events. It was too soon, too painful. The children worked it out more quickly. They bought themselves train tickets to Avignon. "We'll be there tomorrow," they announced in the middle of the night. Fuck, man. He was drugging her during dinners, even when their family was there. The next morning, I left Sylvie's and went back to the house, drawn by the urge to be in my own home and to salvage a few good memories and strength from it. The first thing I saw was the police were back. "Where are the walking boots kept?" one of the investigators asked. I showed him a shelf in the garage. He pulled a pair of socks folded into a ball from one of the boots and unrolled it. Out fell some blister packs of pills, open, sealed, mostly lorazepam, an anxiety and insomnia medication. Dominique had clearly ended up talking. Suddenly, my house was no longer my home. It was full of shadows, hiding places, nooks and crannies, and poison. And where was all the sexy underwear the sleeping woman wore? Not in my chest of drawers. That was for sure. My pants and bras were white and maroon. Those are the colors I like. I always bought them myself. It's true that sometimes Dominique would point things out in lingerie displays. "Look, they're pretty," he'd say. I never paid any attention. That kind of thing wasn't me at all. But there was that one time in Printemps, the department store on Place de la Nation in Paris. I was hesitating between two sets. We couldn't afford both. While I was paying for the set I had chosen, Dominique slipped the other into his pocket. But he was stopped by security and made to pay for it before he could leave. Another red flag. Jesus Christ. "Madame, you mustn't be cross with your husband," the sales associate entreated. "It's such a sweet thing to do. What to do with these memories?" Oh my God. Oh, I drove back to the police station where the children and I had arranged to meet. They were on their way to in a taxi to Avignon station. The fleeting temptation to let go of the steering wheel and put an end to everything crossed my mind. No more than a few seconds, the time it took to dismiss it. I would never give death a helping hand. When David, Caroline, and Florian appeared, I must have looked exhausted and vulnerable, completely lost in my big down coat. One after the other, they took me in their arms. I clung to them as tightly as they clung to me. It was so good to feel their presence. I was completely rigid, desperate to not let myself go. I didn't want to break down and cry. Alone, yes, but not in front of them. After we'd embraced, we all went inside. Deputy Sergeant Perret waved them all into a small office on the ground floor while I waited alone at reception. I didn't know that they were what they were talking about. I just hoped they wouldn't see the photographs. When they came out, Perret called me back in to see me again. Why didn't you tell me about your health concerns and your memory loss? He asked. It was Caroline who had brought this up. Perret had told them about the pills they had found at the house and shown them prescriptions from our family doctor that had also been seized. The doctor had been prescribing lorazepam, Viagra, and zolpidem to my husband, who must have been complaining about having trouble sleeping and getting an erection because of stress over our financial problems. I told Perret the truth. I hadn't made the connection. Yes, I was concerned. Yes, I had become a shadow of myself. I was forgetting so much. I had even booked an appointment for an MRI because I wasn't satisfied with the brain scan. Should I tell him that I was certain I was going to die of a brain tumor like my mother, that the black hole of my childhood sucked everything into it, extinguishing any question, suspicion, or grievance? Should I admit that I was so sure of it that sometimes I said to myself, if this is what it is to die, it's okay. It's not so painful. And that this was how I reconciled myself to death, my mother's and my own? What was the point? The thread of my thoughts led too far back in time, too far from his investigations. It led to a place where I had to go alone. This is just unimaginable. Yeah. I've been prescribed lorazepam. I hated it. I couldn't take it. It was too much. The children and I went back to the house together. I remember thinking with relief that there was some leftover pumpkin soup in the fridge for dinner. All they were thinking about was going through the drawers and cupboards, searching, discovering things they had never suspected. Florian began with his father's desk. He found a speeding ticket given at 2 a.m. What was he doing driving in the middle of the night? They all stared at me as if I had an answer. Their parents had turned into a pair of strangers. The phone rang. It was the police officer. He wanted to see the children again. Caroline and Florian went down to the station where Perret showed them 2 photographs of a young woman asleep, found on their father's computer. Is this you? He asked Caroline. It was. Holy fuck. So she definitely was. He was doing stuff to the girls. She was in a dreadful, almost crazed state when she got back. Had he done something to her too? This was the first I had heard of these photos, and I would only see them later when the case file was being compiled. Now the main thing was to assuage her fears. But what could we say to reassure her after such horrifying discovery? Her suspicions were mounting, and her brother's too. It was all going too fast for me. Night fell. As I headed for my bedroom, Caroline suggested I come and sleep with her away from that now cursed place where everything had happened. But I had a visceral need to be alone. It's hard to deny your child that, but if I joined her, if I had allowed my pain to swell with hers, I'd have collapsed and ended up in an additional burden with my children. I was sure of it. It was my survival instinct that guided me. I needed time and silence to digest everything I had just found out. I needed to find my strength. She, on the other hand, did not want to be on her own. She asked her brother to come and sleep in her room. Florian moved his mattress next to her bed, and I lay down in my own bed, the scene of but still my bed. Would it have made things easier if I had snuggled up to my daughter, if we had stayed up all night talking? I don't know. The next morning, I was up early. She came into the kitchen, restless and jittery. I felt incredibly sad. I was like a robot, clinging to the next task, the next hour. We started going over the events of the last couple of days. Though I understood her suspicions, from now on, nothing about this horror could be ruled out. I couldn't let them become certainties. But to her, my words sounded like denial. I tried to reassure her. I told her that we needed to give the judicial police time to establish facts, time to search through her father's computer files. But we were so different in our approaches to life and its tragedies. This was not the first tragedy I had experienced. I was familiar with the suit of armor I had to don to face the world. I was not going to let myself drown as my father and brother had, and I wanted to help Caroline stay afloat too. We got going on the huge task of sorting out the house. The children instructed me to gather up what I wanted to take with me since we were leaving for Paris the next day. Suddenly, Caroline yanked open the doors of the sideboard and began grabbing plates, sending them flying across the room one after the other and yelling that I didn't need them anymore. Caroline, don't break everything, please. There are things I'd like to keep. What can you possibly want to keep from that life? She cried. Everything was splintering. Objects, our history, us, me. A little more with each passing moment. Caroline ran into the corridor and tore down a picture her father had painted, a nude woman seen from behind. She had always said she wanted to inherit it after he died. Now she went onto the terrace and started trying to rip it to pieces. As she attacked it, the title appeared, written in a pencil on the back of the canvas, utterly terrifying in the light of what we had learned. Coercion. Oh my God. He named a painting Coercion. Eventually, she managed to destroy it completely. Then she started on the frame photographs that hung throughout the house and the photo albums stored in our trunk. All our holidays and Christmases, our youth, their childhood, she ripped up the lot. Page after page, her brothers didn't try to stop her. They carried on calmly, combing through their father's desk, but they undoubtedly shared their sister's rage. All their memories had suddenly turned out to be unbearable lies, but mine hadn't. I clung to my memories. I wanted to hold on to those pictures of a father, a husband, a family built by two messed up kids from the Indre who had gotten married in the shadow of a beautiful chateau. Of course, our children could not tell themselves the same story, so I left them to it, a stranger in my own home. All I managed to do was keep our inquisitive neighbor at bay. She'd been alerted by the screaming and crashing, and I caught her poking her head over the fence into the courtyard. You're not at the circus, you know, I snapped. That's funny. The house was wrecked by sorrow. Oh my God, this is just so fucking tragic. David and Florian piled the debris into rubbish bags and loaded them into their father's car. When it was full, they left for the dump. When they came back, they loaded up the car again. They made several trips, and soon it was not just debris they were carting away, but the wicker golden garden chairs and most of their father's clothes and belongings too. Caroline was in a bad way the next day. She called a psychologist recommended to her by a friend. I watched through the window as she talked, pacing up and down the terrace where we ate in the summer. She told the psychologist that we had just found out what we had just found out and described the two photographs of her asleep. I only caught snatches of the conversation. Eventually, Caroline hung up and stormed back into the house like a fury. He's killed me, she screamed. The psychologist, who had never met her and was speaking to her for the first time, had hinted that it was likely she had been arred by her father. She fell to the floor. Florian moved her to the recovery position while I ran to get her a glass of sugary water. That's so French. We called the emergency services, who said we should take her straight to the hospital, but Florian and David didn't want to miss our train that afternoon. They couldn't bear to spend another night in the house. They found a doctor in Mazan who prescribed Caroline a tranquilizer. It was time to leave. I didn't want to. I wanted to spend the day at home and sleep at Sylvie's. I wanted to keep walking around the house, but I didn't protest. I didn't have the strength to say no to them. They talked to me as if they were speaking to a child. I obeyed. They meant well. They thought it was their duty to look after me. I followed them. Sylvie dropped us at the station. All I had with me were 2 suitcases and Lancome, our little bulldog. She named her bulldog Lancome. That's so cute. On his leash, still waiting for his master's return. We sped away on the high-speed train. There were long silences between us, a mixture of exhaustion and shock. I was only beginning to put 2 and 2 together, but mostly I had the peculiar feeling of being inside an enormous shredder. Oh, wow, I can identify with that. My children had lives to go back to. I had nothing. Arriving in the Gare de Lyon in Paris was in a way the most painful moment of all. it still makes me cry to think about it. I had no idea what I was doing there. The crowd on the platform was like a swarm of flies bearing down on me. The void was sucking me in. It was the old fault line between my feet, beneath my feet. Had been there all along, and now it was opening up again, swallowing everything that I held dear. Wow. Lancome is L'Oreal. Yes, that is my understanding, Autumn. I'm sorry, I'm just taking a moment to take this in. You know, I have a vague memory of her daughter coming out and being interviewed, and she may have even written a book. And I sense that there's like a whole yeah, that's true, Autumn. I sense that there's a lot of resentment between Gisele and her daughter, which we might get more enlightenment on as we go through the book. But Gisele is a person who stoically handles her tragedy and probably needs help with that. Her daughter outwardly expresses her trauma and tragedy and sadness and depression and anger. And to this day, I don't know. I'm hoping that we get to hear more about how their relationship progresses, because it sounds to me like Caroline really wanted her mother to comfort and nurture her, which is, you know, understandable. That's your mother, but at the same time, her mother is also experiencing this, right? And it's really then the other thing I'm putting together in my head is that she's talking about financial trouble. So it sounds like they were still having financial troubles right up to the point that this was happening, and maybe that was his way of trying to get some money. You know, I'm not just excusing it, but that's what happens when people experience poorness and poverty. If they can't find the money any other way, they will resort to crime. That's what they do. And yeah, my mom was very good at being there for me, but she was also very what's the word? She also needed her own space. My mom needed a lot of her own space. And I've become just like her. I'm a person that needs a lot of my own space. Give me my space. I actually like being alone more than with people. But I am a very social person. I had to be for my career. So I'm very social. I have a lot of friends, but I prefer to be alone. I just do. And so I understand that sensibility. Anyway, I've been now reading for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm kind of read out, and that was really heavy. I knew when my mom was not capable, her being a survivor. Mine was more coerced, control, grooming, dating an older man as a teen. Yeah. That I swear to God, I have not met a woman who hasn't been affected in some way by something like this. And it's just in degrees, you know. I just haven't. I haven't met a woman who hasn't experienced some sort of SA, whether it just be, someone grabbing their butt or someone, kissing them, or right up to what this poor woman has gone through. So anyway, I really appreciate you all hanging in here with me. I got a text from my lovely Cinnamon co-reader saying that she's sorry that she couldn't be with us. And we missed her. We missed her lovely voice, but hopefully she will be with us next week. In the meantime, again, thank you so much for being here. She is lovely, Autumn. Thank you for being here. And please remember to hit the thumbs up. Have a wonderful rest of your day. If you If you don't want to contribute to the channel, if you want to become a member of the channel, the links have been going through the chat. But also, if you want to donate in a different way, I just shared the links again. Never expected, always appreciated. And I always appreciate you all being here with me for my book clubs. So until next time, I will see you very soon.